what is this Christianity thing? We hear about it. Obviously we know the religion, we know the crosses, they're all over the place. You can't really go anywhere without anywhere in the European or Western world without seeing elements of Christianity. But how did it become this way? I mean, certainly it wasn't always like this. I mean, people used to believe in the pagan gods, and we kind of get this story that, okay, so Jesus happens, right? Jesus is crucified. Jesus dies on the cross. He comes back to life. He appears to some crowds, but it's not like the whole world is immediately Christian right after that. And usually we kind of get this story that, oh, well, Constantine became Christian around 300 AD, and then the whole Roman Empire just became Christian, and that's that. But it's probably a little bit more complicated than all that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, Jack. It's one of the most fascinating stories in world history because we basically have no good analog for it in history. I mean, we have the spread of Islam, but the spread of Islam is there's a small group that follows Islam and they conquer a bunch of territory and it's instantly this big religion. With Christianity, what we have is we have something that is just an obscure faith in a very marginal province, a very marginal part of this vast empire, and it grows to become this absolutely immense, and it grows and grows and grows, and it's only 300 years later that they convert their first, leader of an entire country, and then from there, they just keep going, because that empire, the Roman Empire, it collapses, and yet it still keeps growing. It expands into new kingdoms, and it just grows and grows and grows and becomes the most influential ideology of any kind in world history, that we all, even if you're not Christian, even if you follow a religion other than Christianity, you live in the Christian world, the world that Christianity built. Like, we all have its imprint on our brains, on how we see the world, on how we think about moral questions. And it's one of the most interesting stories in world history. Obviously, the saga of Christ himself is fascinating, but what his followers in the centuries that followed were able to do.
And so the story of Constantine that people do know, and that is also associated with a miracle. And Constantine, he was fighting in a war against, of course, another emperor of Rome, or would-be emperor of Rome in northern Italy. And he's about to cross this, or there's this battle of the bridge, the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, and he purportedly sees a cross in the sky and adopted the phrase, "In this sign you will conquer." And this, it's a year late. He wins the battle, obviously, and then a year later, he issues the Edict of Milan, and this, of course, legalizes Christianity, because prior to then, I think most people know this part of the story, that Christianity wasn't exactly encouraged in the Roman Empire prior to this, and at that point, he makes it legal, but he doesn't necessarily just force everyone to become Christian, does he?
No, not at all. It starts off with just, as you say, an edict of toleration, and it was quite the swerve because just a few decades before just a few years before, you have the persecution of Diocletian, the Great Persecution they called it, where Diocletian is a Roman emperor, and he orders very intense targeting of Christians. This is probably when the most people would have ever been martyred for Christianity. It actually causes a split in the Christian community because you have some people who abandon the faith under pressure. And then there's a whole debate, like, do we welcome these people back? And ultimately, the ruling was, yes, we do. And then you have more persecutions under Diocletian's successor. I think is it Galerius? I don't want to get the emperor wrong. There's a lot of emperors. And then it swerves back to toleration, but it's a very generous toleration. Constantine gives a lot of patronage to Christians. He puts a lot of Christians in senior positions of his imperial administration. And of course, Constantine himself becomes a Christian, and he makes his sons into Christians. And so from there, it's just like a rocket ship. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It becomes more and more popular, especially with the urban classes of the Roman Empire. And then from there, it spreads into the masses. But I think one of the most amazing things is,
well, so is there kind of an idea is there kind of an idea that, oh, well, if the emperor and the royal family are Christian, then we should be Christian too, because that'll kind of help us get in with the emperor? Is it purely a political thing, or was it something where it was catching on and people were saying, hey, there's something to this?
I mean, it's definitely a mixture of both. You see people, you see Christians at the time complain who say, "Oh, our faith, like it was so pure when we were a persecuted faith because everyone was very much a true believer." And then once the emperors are
Oh yeah,
patronizing
the
it, well, yeah,
OGs. So
you have
the
some people
OGs
who
were
are
like
just,
complaining about it. That like,
yeah.
oh, I was a Christian when it was hard to be
Yep.
Christian. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If it makes you feel better, if it makes everyone feel better, what I can say is I'm drawing a lot on this book that's a favorite of mine, The Barbarian Conversion from Paganism to Christianity by Richard Fletcher. Very nerdy book, but if you like nerdy books, it's a fun one. And one of the things in it is, for all of Christian history, the Christians of our present moment say, "Oh, the past generations of Christians were just so much better than us. They were so much more devout. And now people today, they don't care. They're all terrible." They've been doing that 2,000 years straight. They were doing it in the 300s. They were doing it in 1000. They were doing it in 1500. And they're doing it today.